Live.
All right, we should be live. Okay, so we're live and we're broadcasting. So right now I am a week away from WorkerConf. At WorkerConf, I will be doing a public user feedback session, focused around European context. WorkerConf has some components of it that are unconferencey, and I'll be doing a session, very similar to the one that we did at IBM Index. I don't have any sort of seated. I was going to use the word plants. I don't have any seated, discussion members yet. So if you know anybody that is in the Eastern Austria area, or have any context there, I'd love to get some connections set up ahead of time, so I'm not working too hard. But I'm also fairly comfortable sort of walking into a room and beginning to have those conversations.
What about Dan Kahn? I don't know what area he's in, but he's
right on.
Around there.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah. I don't know what areas he's in either, yeah. But he's the closest. He's the only Austrian I know.
Yeah, exactly. Same. And he might be speaking there already. He might.
Do you have an idea of whether, I guess probably not, like whether you'd focus on tooling, enterprise, or just general? It sounds like it's just general if it's not.
Just general, right? Yeah, I think it's going. I want to tap into some of the European challenges. From discussions that I've had with other members there. There are still sort of management tensions that folks are dealing with in getting the right to use the technology. Folks are still a little bit more comfortable with Java and some other technologies like that. So I expect that to be context. And since I've gone through the process of seeing that play out in multiple different communities, I can share some of the my feedback of how that's evolved over time in other parts of the world with other folks getting on board.
Okay.
So I'm looking at who's attending, or like who's speaking, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's an individual from Bloomberg and an individual from Oracle who might, and Nick Raff, who's had stuff like this in the past. So you might want to reach out to them. And Nick Raff is from Serverless, so you might have some interesting discussions with them.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be fun.
And Serverless, the company.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dan, do you have anybody? So, is going to be live this thing?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Well, it'll be live, like IBM Index was live. Yeah, live and in person. Sorry, yes.
I mean on YouTube. If we have on Node.js set up on YouTube channel for that, or on YouTube. Thing. I mean,
right. Yeah, that's a great way to capture it. Like we did with the Berlin Collaborator Summit, and
yes. Even if it wasn't so bad. I mean, technically speaking, it was okay from my point. I mean, yeah, of course you can expect like you don't hear everything, but at least somehow it gives you the feeling you are there.
Right on. Right on. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Reach out to Benedict to see if that's possible.
Yeah, exactly. If it's possible, if not, if you keep in your mind, if you try to record something and just send me after that the audio files, then I could make some notes after that.
Perfect. Thank you.
You could honestly probably just bring a recorder on stage and just like record the audio like that if you needed to.
Yeah, that should be fine. So
Great. Well, I'll drop my phone near us and do the recording there. And yeah, at the very least, I'm going to set up a Zoom stream and we'll just set my laptop in front of us like we did at IBM Index, and we'll broadcast to the YouTube channel that way.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So I wanted to pull in some of the threads and discussions that happened in the Collaborator Summit at Berlin that haven't quite made it to GitHub. They don't really exist yet.
Is that the next item on the agenda, or is that something?
I'm totally off agenda.
Okay. I'm just
Thank you.
Putting a different section. Let's maybe just, is there anything to talk about? Invite Node.js tooling ecosystem folks to discuss user feedback. I don't know what there is to discuss on that front, right? Because I think that's up and running. Was there some?
Right. Yeah, we may just need, that may just have been an item from last week that, last session, sorry, that hasn't had the label removed. Because I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that label so we don't get it in the future. And I am extraordinarily happy with how that is progressing. So let's continue to support Christopher, and more of that. Yay.
Yep, that's great. Okay, so pulling in the threads from the Collab Summit, and I'm just going to add in after that next user feedback session. Okay, so go ahead.
So I probably had 3 to 5 folks mention, hey, wow, yeah, like we would like to do user feedback based sessions. I think I encouraged everyone to create issues. I'm not 100% sure. But the reality is there are not issues with them, and the only one that I remember top of mind was promises.
Yeah,
old wheelhouse of mine, bringing folks together around promises. Are there any other sessions that folks remember that we needed to capture?
Oh, geez. I don't remember them.
Right.
Yes, and no, I don't remember them.
No.
So one thing I will suggest, and this is just from having helped bootstrap ComCom stuff, is take away as much of the big, like that starting work as you can from other people, and then let them carry on with it. Because pulling the trigger on creating an issue, it's theoretically very simple. It's the largest barrier to entry.
Yep.
And if you do that, you will help enable people succeed. That's what I found with all of the initiatives and stuff. And it's hard for me to start saying no, because like they're all past that point. So I'm still in that mindset, but it's not needed anymore. So once you start doing that and introduce that to people, it'll become more easy over time.
So let me just ask a clarifying question. Mm-hmm. Is your suggestion to go and create the issue for folks, or don't create the issue and let them
create the issue for folks, ping them, make sure they come in and like look at it and engage with it, and then you can like kind of help manage that a little bit, or do whatever we need to do. But taking that first step of creating the issue is very helpful to get things going, because people often don't feel like they're familiar enough. Totally. And so having someone who they perceive as familiar enough tears down that barrier.
Yeah, yeah.
So on the promises front, like the other groups we have are kind of focused around groups in the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. And I could see promises being a topic that any one of those groups would look at. I'm just trying to better understand, like, what would the promises user feedback group be?
So you didn't have the opportunity to be in that session, did you?
I was in one of them where there was a lot of discussion around use cases and stuff like that.
Okay, so you were there.
That was almost led as a, we have a technical, let's understand the technical requirements and then define requirements and then, push that forward, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think this can be less like the ecosystem things that we've been doing and more like the first one we did with the benchmarking working group. So right. we kind of do have two approaches. We have precedent for two approaches, and we've just been leaning on the latter approach a lot more recently. But that doesn't mean that we have a lot more input from different individuals who are in the ecosystem now. So it's actually, we can go do those things more strongly now, those original approaches.
And sort of like the benchmark, we supported an effort that they came up with.
Yep.
And I think similarly, I can easily see that being the case. There's a bunch of places where actually we have discussions about, creating surveys, and, I'm involved in a couple of those where it's like, okay, as soon as we come up with the questions, we'll bring them over to the user feedback group to help go out to the greater community, get that feedback. So there's, and one of them is around, I think because there's already a promises debugging sort of sub work group being created in the diagnostic work group. I think they were talking about one. I think modules were also talking about one. So that I can kind of understand. In the case of promises, it's like, I'm just trying to figure out in my mind, maybe you guys already have it clear, sort of the best model of, what we want to do to support that, and the end goal of, what at the end do we come out with that's the thing that we've achieved.
So my understanding from the sessions is, we have very active proponents that have engaged with promises and engaged with the promises ecosystem. And they feel like the broader community doesn't have a clear understanding of the scenarios where promises are used and the challenges around that, and they'd like to build understanding and get feedback around promise usage. And if I put words in their mouth, I would think that their end game would be to see if they could influence the project more to encourage more platform level adoption and support for promises.
Right. So I guess what I'm thinking is
right? Now heading that direction.
Yeah, and that kind of fits in with my the impression I got. It's like, it's in this case, it's not like there needs help in terms of bringing people together and getting the discussion going, right? That sounds like, Benjamin was already pushing on that, and he's kind of, but it's so the question is, how can we support that effort? Right. And certainly like helping to do a survey is like, I don't know, like, I'm not thinking that we need to get involved to schedule the meetings and get that going. And unless that's something that Benjamin says, well, wait a sec, I actually need help doing that. Right.
Okay. I imagine, in a similar vein to, what Tierney just said about, creating that first issue, I think we would probably need to do at least one.
Right.
Right. But if I would really like if we framed it as we're going to do one, and then we're going to do a session. We're going to teach you how to fish, and then please run more of these sessions so you can get more feedback. We will continue to amplify and support. Encouraging either companies that are actively using promises or companies that are struggling or unhappy with promises, to come and engage in those sessions. And by having, those sessions captured and, the feedback discussions, I think that will, provide the baseline inputs that the project needs to be able to get more feedback, and then from there, maybe a survey would be a good tool. But I think there's probably some steps before a survey, some consensus building before a survey to be most effective.
Okay. Yeah. No. In that context, that makes sense. I was just, we can only take on so many regular meetings for this group, right? We've kind of got, I think we've got the tooling one is going to go off on its own cadence, which is good. The other two, we still need to put some work into to actually get some critical mass. So I was just thinking, we don't want to take another one where we're driving the scheduling and all that again. But I agree 100% that if I think we should grab Benchmer and say, hey, what do you think will help get this off the ground the best? And if us helping to schedule and get those first initial few meetings going is what he thinks will help, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Fantastic.
Because the goal would be to end up with some, regular feedback on, okay, got it.
And on top of that, I do think that we shouldn't just like say, okay, cool, we've done one meeting with you, go fish, go and continue doing these meetings. Based on my experience, even with this group, it's very helpful to have someone who can answer questions, about how things work. And so, one of us, one of the members of the group, it would be helpful if we could always be attending, and we don't have to commit to attending one, but raising our hand if we can, that would be extremely helpful and beneficial.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Until things are sort of running, and even so, it's good to be. Yeah, I think you're right. It's good to have a link back to the project.
Yeah. Okay, I have two things. I need to write the other one down because I'm going to forget it. So, one of the other things that I think would be useful for feedback is documentation. And this is coming from website redesign and my experience there. We are beginning to look at how we can continuously improve the documentation, improve guides, and there's actually a pretty hefty amount of issues that are going to be created or have been created to create new guides and begin to address that content. And we're actually at the point where we are beginning to content create simultaneously with the design happening. So being able to get feedback on the current state of the documentation, because that's something that, yes, we can talk to people in Node Core. They have opinions. That's great. They're not the end consumers of it. And so being able to get feedback on that would be helpful. And I think we don't need to go into a meeting for that necessarily, but just going to a survey. And I will also create an issue for this. I promise I will. I'll create an issue for this in the website repo to begin collecting the questions. Website redesign, not website. and see if there is interest, and then if there is, what the questions are.
So encourage the members of that working group to build that list of questions.
Yes,
Great.
exactly.
Okay.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's
great.
But I agree. I don't think a meeting to go through it necessarily is the best.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that could come out of a meeting that adds to what the kind of context, at least that I personally already have around this. And
I always adjust if it seems like for some reason it's needed later, but doing it offline sounds like the right starting point.
Yeah. And then with that, are there other agenda items?
Though I just wanted to back up to the promises one.
Cool.
So Dan, in the discussions there, do you think there's any other TSC members that we identified as particularly interested on that front?
Great question. So V8 team's keenly interested. And I think we could get them to engage there. Sorry, this is me sort of mentally going around the room.
Yeah, makes sense. Let me take a look at the list too. I'm just thinking like another, if we could pull in somebody from that list, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be relatively technical.
Right.
Yeah, I think Miles is already, he's championing modules.
Right.
So Anna's certainly done some work on that front, so it's worth reaching out to her to see. I know she's quite busy though, so.
Right.
I guess we could check with Francisca too. Just she has the link with Google, who you're mentioning has interest. So. Okay, so I guess you're going to open the issue, and once that happens, maybe I'll try and talk to them, one or both of them, to see if they have any interest. That we see if we can pull them in.
Sounds great.
I'm trying to. I have too many things happening at once.
Yovman and Madura Uchi from the. Here, let me send what I'm looking at, so I'm not reading. I know Kyle Getify is not a collaborator, but our Madara Uchiha or Yav Menen. Are they collaborators? Is there a good, easy way to sort of check if folks are collaborators? Is it members?
Yes. So if a person is a member, they are. God, I hate the word collaborator. They're a collaborator of the Node.js GitHub org. So we use that word too much, collaborator. So in that sense, yes, they're a Node.js org collaborator if they are a member.
And what's the easiest way to go and check that?
So you can, if you know their GitHub profile or GitHub URL, if you're looking at an issue with them, it literally says member on the issue, whether they commented. Or you can go into the Node.js teams, so Node.js Foundation, GitHub org, teams, and then type, go to people, not teams. And then type their handle. So D Shaw, there you go. You're in 5 teams.
Drop that link. Would you mind?
What's that?
Would you mind dropping that link?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I tried to
follow
that and write it down, and it failed.
Okay, there you go. It updated. It didn't update the URL for like 5 seconds. Yeah, so
Org is what I was missing.
Yes,
okay.
Org.
So what were you trying to figure out? I'm just not following.
So
for some
in the promises use cases, I was looking if the contributors to that promises use cases were beyond
if they were okay.
Were collaborators.
Okay.
And they were, which is fine. Okay. So action item for me: create the promises outreach and reach out to both Ben and why don't we follow that pattern of we're helping Ben. Let's get Ben to also bring additional members with him from the TSC of some differing perspectives.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like if we can get. I mean, I don't. Yeah, ours is to help get the engagement in the project. So if we can pull in a couple others, we'll try and do that.
Good stuff. I like that. Okay, action on me. So next on the agenda.
So next user feedback session I added. So like it's which group are we going to schedule and do next? I'm wondering, I can't remember whether we did enterprise or general last, but
we did enterprise last, I think.
Right. We haven't done a general session. Well, unless we consider the worker conf in person, Europe, a general session.
I think those are really orthogonal because we're not like we're trying to build a group of regular attendees who participate in driving things forward. So I guess then we should, if that's, we should probably schedule that one as the next slot. I don't know which date, like the July 5th, is that I don't know, is that, because when is the holiday in the US, right? I'm thinking if it conflicts with that.
Yeah, the week of the 5th is
July
generally not a good one because folks will, especially this year with the 4th being right in the middle of the week. I'm getting folks that are doing either before or after the 4th as the rest of the, sort of long week.
How about if we're moving to Mondays, then not the Monday after that, but the Monday afterwards?
The 16th?
I think that, so it would be like July 1st, 2nd. We're doing the 5th still.
It's the 9th.
Yeah.
The 9th? There's
a compound meeting that's happening then as well.
Right, but like the 9th is the off week for us, so we're going to do the something on the week of the 6th, probably just an internal team meeting.
Yep.
At the regular time on the 6th, and then on the week of the 16th, which would normally be the Friday the 20th, but I'd be open to scheduling on the 16th.
Yeah. I think that's a good
feedback.
idea. Yeah. That gives enough time that we can try and like still get some organization discussion going. I think scheduling it will kind of remind and reinvigorate some people to get that moving forward.
Great. Mihai, could I ask you to create a general feedback issue? Replicating the last general feedback session, maybe, so I don't take a bunch of action items and then not have time to get to them all.
Not a problem. So we are going to set on July 16. Yeah, sure. Okay, then July 16 it is. I'll create an issue on that.
Great. Okay. And I'm updating the calendar now. Just while we have everybody here convened, can you please look at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, which would be our standard, or, usual time. Would that work?
Yes,
just
anyway, for me it will be like 7 p.m. In Europe, but that's okay for
Better.
me.
Right.
okay. Just a sec. I'm looking, but I think that's my lunchtime. So less things tend to be scheduled over lunch.
Great. So I've got the calendar update.
So July 16th. Yeah, I should be good.
Great.
Perfect.
And then I guess on the similar topic, I don't know if you've had a chance to catch up with Ahmad yet.
To get him rolling, I haven't had a chance to follow up with the issue that I created, but I'd be happy to have him, push forward and to kind of take the ball and organize the next enterprise session and lead that.
I was just going to offer, like, if you haven't had a chance to talk to him, I can do that. But I think one of the two of us should, get to him and say, hey, are you interested? Do you want to push this forward?
Great.
Because I got the sense he probably would be.
I think so. Why don't I leave that to you to do that and to do that feedback, and I'll just nudge him on Twitter and say, hey, Michael Dawson's going to follow up and just so he's expecting you.
Yeah, sounds good. And I guess I do have, we talked about this last time, somewhere in my email, I should have his email contact info. So
cool. I'll DM.
Yeah.
I have another topic if we can talk about it. No worries if not that. Like if we have something else, that's okay. But
that's all I had.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the things that I brought up in the Node Foundation Marketing Committee meeting was that I'd like to begin to try to figure out how we can get better metrics around real world usage of Node. It's a hard thing for me to say. So yeah, that's something I would like to begin to kind of figure out how we can do. Because right
telemetry!
now, I mean, I'd be for it. I know a bunch of other people wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think phoning home is going to go over.
But yeah, so that's something that would be great. We need to figure out some approach, and honestly, the approach that I am thinking of is probably going to be the best way to do it. Is actually go to the major cloud providers, because we do have 3 of them as members, and then 1 who is not. I have talked to my
IBM
boss.
has a cloud too.
That's like I said, 3 of them: Microsoft, IBM, and Google.
Yes. You even had to say that. It's like
yes, yes, and then 1 that is not. Yeah, 1 that's not a member of the foundation. I'm curious what the other one you thought is. Although there is Joyent as well, which
that's right. No, I whiffed that. The big cloud is not a member.
Yeah.
Damn.
Right. And so, I've talked to my boss about this and getting time to actually dedicate to going through and doing this work, on top of like what I already do, like actually taking the time to very methodically go and do this. So, my ideal, and I have talked about this with a couple people already, need to go to each cloud provider, each member that is a cloud provider, ask them to share their metrics anonymously and as a group, as a batch. So not actually publish each cloud provider's metrics, because that's a very antitrusty thing that I'm sure, we can't do that. So beyond that, if we can publish the batch of the batch of metrics, that will be helpful for us to actually understand real world usage, because these are places that Node.js is majorly being deployed. If I have 3 cloud providers on board, I'm hoping that the biggest one will be willing to also share. So that is a hope.
It'll be interesting. I can see some reluctance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like even if just the total numbers published,
Right.
that potentially leaks information. You know, if I know mine and I see what the other ones are, it can actually, you know, give me significant insight, right? So it'll be interesting to see if you can come up with something that the cloud vendors say, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and like it's not going to be easy. I know that, and that's why I went and explicitly got permission to dedicate time to this, because it's not going to be something I can just kind of do on the side.
Yep. And what's sort of the major win from that data?
So right now, we have a number that is npm's users. We have historically said that is Node.js instances. That is not accurate in any way, shape, or form. That is npm users. And even like crunching node sources numbers from the Debian stuff, that is dramatically underrepresented of the Node.js deployments. And like I've gone through and tried to do some correlation between the node source numbers and the Node.js public numbers. And, you know,
Docker.
Yeah, exactly. And Docker. That's one that we don't actually usually consider when we're considering Node.js public numbers, is the Docker, because they have the Docker WG, because they have a significant amount. They have about a third of.
But is it that we need to convince people that there's significant adoption? Like people look at the numbers and say, I'm not convinced Node.js is really used that much. Is that like, so, I'm just trying to figure out what sell in the end we've made.
I think it's the kind of around it, and to actually practice and understand our numbers as a project.
Right.
Sorry, you broke up a bit there. I didn't quite catch it. Oh, maybe I broke up.
No, I think it was Tierney. It was Tierney broke up for me.
I will move into the room closer to the Wi-Fi router. Go ahead.
While Tierney is doing that, let me try to see if I can put my interpretation on this. So with that being an npm number, I don't think we need to that number doesn't necessarily need to be a number that we are yes we are. I guess I should be more direct. In the end, that number does represent a usage number, and I think what Tierney's trying to discover is if there's a better way for us to collect and represent that number from actual node users or node installed instances rather than npm instantiations.
Right. So I can understand that. I was just trying to understand, are we solving a problem? Yes, we can make it more precise, but what's the problem that it solves?
So the problem it solves is we don't actually have any understanding of how Node is used. We understand the places it's used. We don't understand at what scale, why, where. Like, for example, we can. I was told at the Collaborator Summit, a large number of the downloads from the public Node.js download set, like the Node.js website, are actually probably used for Jenkins, the Node Jenkins.
Which, our internal Jenkins.
Yes. Yeah. So we need to even figure that out and what that metric is.
Sure.
Because that's a huge misrepresentation of the data set, is like, okay, these aren't real world downloads. And so, if we can even isolate those IPs and, begin to understand that. But on top of that, there are multiple ways to actually begin to go and use Node.js. So you're going to be using it in CI/CD. You're going to be using it in dev. You're going to be using it in staging and in production. So being able to act and
but right. I think once you go beyond some high level numbers, you then get into even more trickiness in terms of like, can the cloud providers even collect that data? I know, there's been lots of discussions around, we'd love to have really good insight into what our customers are doing, but there's obviously, you can't just go and collect all their data, right? You got to respect their privacy and what they're doing, and so I won't be surprised if most cloud vendors don't have the data we'd like to get, and even then, if they did, could they share it? And then anyway, it's
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if we were to ask every vendor to provide instantiation numbers and like who's going to hold those numbers and are they
right?
going
Yeah, even who's the neutral third party? You got a good point.
Right. So I think we could probably go down the path, and like that again. That's an unknown in this that I can go and figure out. That shouldn't be me, probably. So that should probably be someone under a legal agreement with the foundation, as a foundation employee. So that's where that should live, and like I am available to go do that work of figuring that out and getting that placed and getting that process under handle.
But
maybe I'm a foundation lawyer.
I'll come back to I'd really, I'd love to have detailed information, but I can see so many challenges that, like, to convince somebody to hand over that data, if they have it, we need a very strong, why is this critical to pushing Node forward, right?
Yeah, and even developing that message is something that I would be able to work on.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah, certainly. Do you have a conjecture, where I think you're going to find the biggest success in doing this is if we are grossly underreporting.
Yes, we are. I do have a conjecture that we are grossly underreporting right now.
But how much?
So with two data sets, the node source data set and the public data set, we are at the lower end of the 9 million number is the lower end of the possible range. So my estimate, it's 18 million.
Okay, so if we're twice as much, that begins to get compelling. Do you have access to a data person?
What do you mean by that?
My experience with dealing with data scientists is there's how I read data, and there's how someone who kind of does data science and processing those things professionally. And you're going to get smacked by a data scientist in this task. So I think you would benefit from getting a sanity check on your range there from a data scientist first.
And that is a total guesstimate of 1 to 2% of that number of downloads.
Right, and I'd throw in deployments. I'd throw in my first impression of 9 to 18 is that doesn't sell me or unsell me on Node.js.
Right.
And I believe 9 to 18 does a lot for me. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Because I'm 9 million, 18 million, there's still, 9 million is great and 18 million is even better, but are they quantitatively different? The growth obviously is important. So if we went from 9 to 18 in 1 year, sure.
Yeah, and that's the range of, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is we've been tracking this metric of Node.js instances that is really NPM users, and that's our the place where year-over-year growth has been discussed previously.
Right.
That is not the case anymore. That number is not growing at double year-over-year. That's growing at 1 to 2 million a year now.
Right. Okay.
And that's
So if
And,
we believe that,
NPM instances do not in any way reflect actual node instances, because I'm going to, NPM install into a container once and then Kuberneteseify
sure.
a billion things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that I would agree. Like if data can support that the growth is still doubling, whereas our existing things haven't, then I'm interested. The raw number was like,
Sure.
it's a big number and a big number. If it was 9 and 100 million, like if it's 10 times, then I go, hey, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, for context, we are at 1 billion downloads between the public data sets of Node.js. I was not actually able to get the total data set from NodeSource, but we are at 1 billion or nearly 1 billion just from those two public data sets. So even that is like, okay, we know there are other sources out there. We cannot just rely on this data set as the single source of truth, because even the people who are talking about that single source of truth have their own data sets. And so we need to be able to correlate that a bit.
I mean,
yeah.
Docker's a good one for sure.
Yeah, and that's including Docker, the billion.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's something we haven't really talked about a ton. In the past.
Because really, like our downloads, the Docker, then I guess, I don't know, it's like the distros are the other major sources, right?
Yep.
Is there any other ones beyond that?
So it gets frustrating with things like, I mean, public sources, no. There are things where each cloud provider what's that?
App Engine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the build packs are too as well.
Cloud Foundry. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Those things are a bit different than, see, because the downloads and Docker instances, those actually probably don't even relate necessarily to deployments.
Yep.
So deployments are quite different.
So Docker is a closer representation of deployments than downloads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's a pull, and so it's effectively one person using it. There is zero way to tell if it's a development deployment or a development usage or a CI/CD usage or a production usage.
Yeah, and if you want like instances deployed, like Kubernetes would pull probably once at the very beginning, and then that's it, right?
Yep, exactly.
And you can
at
even
that point
see
you
a cloud
count that as one deployment because you're deploying it once, and then it's things are happening. I don't know if that should be counted as multiple deployments because you're deploying it and it's doing its thing.
Well, you could think of like a cloud provider may pull a Docker image once and have plenty of caching to,
Exactly. That's the other thing, is that caching is a tremendous, like, can you imagine a enterprise company at the scale of like Netflix? They're probably doing a lot of caching on their, whatever usage of Node they have. We're not going to have any insight into that, and that's fine. But we do have to begin to try to correlate the data that we have or the data that we can get and begin to understand it and know that there are these caveats, because that is how we built this platform, and that is totally fine. But to begin to collect this data and understand it is something that we need to do.
Tierney, we're at time.
Yep.
Okay. I think that at the end of this rainbow, folks are going to find it easier to accept a pingback and opt into telemetry than to give you data.
You were probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. And so even on top of that, like just saying the data set period, like the total usage, you're right. You're right. You're not wrong. So it's going to be a challenge. Yeah.
It's great.
I'd be really interested. Yeah, I mean that's got some interesting user feedback.
Exactly.
People will be willing to have it basically send a data packet. People are just going to have the security people will be like, well, how do I know that it's just sending what you say it sends?
Sure. I've gone through that a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
Now I guess it's open source, so you can look at the code. So there's some benefit on that front, but.
And make it opt in rather than opt out.
Make it opt in, not opt down.
I'd be interesting to know how many people opt in.
Yeah, it would be for sure.
Like
Right.
I just meant with other existing ones. I know that I'm always like, no.
We could probably ask V8 and the Chromium team.
Right.
Do they actually do that kind of thing?
That
Yep.
is a feature you can turn on in Chrome.
Yeah.
Data.
So actually, it'd be interesting to know in Chrome, like how many people turned it on.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
great data point. Right. And you know, it's you know, kind of nudging folks toward their comfort zone. So things like, hey, you know, that prompt that you accepted when you you know, did that in Chrome. You're comfortable with that, so we're going to do that you know, for the whole Node.js community. How can we do that?
Yeah. Awesome.
I think it's great, Tony. You know, let me know on the way if you know, anyone needs sort of poking and prodding.
Okay.
I'm happy to help out.
Okay, sounds good. Cool.
Great. So we'll wrap it up here. We'll be back on the 6th with a team meeting. You know, that might be a great opportunity to bring Benjamin as a guest. To have a discussion around the promises session.
I'd almost suggest we invite him and Ahmad.
Okay.
Just as a, hey,
nice.
Here's a time to talk to the broader group. So when I talk to him, I'll suggest that.
Awesome. Mihai, could you, or Michael, I don't know, could one of you create an issue for the 6th meeting so we can, you know, basically give them a home to home in on? I'll add them to the calendar now.
Yeah. Mihai, do you want to create that issue?
Yeah, sure.
You're creating the other one. You might as well create two.
Yeah, I'll create really quick both of them, and then I will give more details.
Sounds good.
So right now, create an issue for our team meeting on July 6th.
That one should just get created itself.
Oh yeah, you're right.
The calendar, it'll get generated. The other one's probably worth doing just because it's further out and we want a broader visibility in advance.
Well, if we want to invite them to that session and have them put a discussion around that, I think it would be helpful to have that meeting there rather than, you know, creating an issue around that and then pulling it in.
Yeah, either way.
Okay.
I will do manually for the 16 one, and
okay.
Michael, you can do that automatically. The July 6th one. Is that something good?
But I think Dan just suggested that we should do one in advance, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just have that now so we can just, you know, as we're having discussions with both Ben and you know, Ahmed, then you know, just have them you know, send them to that issue.
So yeah. I would, you know, to be honest, Dan, the easiest, because it's automatic, right? Like as soon as you make it not automatic, it's harder. So the easiest is to actually create a new issue, tag it as an agenda item.
Okay.
And you can call it whatever you want, right? Like it could be meeting, you know, discussion topics for meeting, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Tag it with that. Then it will automatically get added to the agenda for that one. And whatever we would have discussed, because there's no point creating the template and all the issues because the issues won't be up to date enough and all that. So that's what I'd suggest.
Okay.
So Mihai, if you can just create two issues. If you're creating one, create them both.
I already created the July 6th one.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay.
And I'll create one for the public session on July 16, and then based on that, I need to create an agenda from there.
Yes. Yeah, if you take a first cut, we can chime in and help.
Exactly.
Great.
Okay, I'm gonna drop off.
Yep, I've got to run too. Okay. Thanks everybody, and great session. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Mihai.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye.